I wanted to talk about some of these books, but I think it's only going to be Mania by Lionel Shriver. In an alternative America, people embrace the mental parity movement, which holds that there's no such thing as variable human intelligence. Discrimination against stupid people is the last great civil rights fight. Tests, grades, job qualifications are discarded. The novel is in the form of a memoir. She says, I don't mean to condescend to anyone who's lived through the same era I have, but it could be nominally useful to step back and assemble the dysfunctions of the last few years. We assume that whoever is elected president will surround him or herself with mediocrities or worse, and purposefully appoint a cabinet whose leading credentials are having no credentials. The wholesale embrace of a flagrant lie by an entire population has inevitably opened the gateway for other lies. We have severed our connection to truth, thereby losing faith in the very existence of truth. That means our representatives can say anything, espouse anything. Everyone is beautiful. The assertion alone makes it so. In throwing in our lot with what we call to be true rather than what is true, we break with the scientific method through which all advanced economies have achieved their prosperity, a method whose previous practitioners were willing to brave the discovery of the ideologically inconvenient. Having fallen hypnotically in love with its own virtue, the West has ceded South and Central America, Africa, and the Middle East to the de facto control of the Chinese, thanks to whom the oceans are nearly dead. With no other nation willing to constrain the practice, their super trawlers have raked the ocean beds bare, and a single 18-ounce bass can now sell for $300. The Chinese cannot believe their luck. In their national mythology, global domination is their destiny. But Xi Jinping never imagined the competition would so obligingly accelerate the inevitable by committing civilizational suicide. Most Americans don't regard a full-scale invasion of our continental territory as remotely within the range of possibility, but I do. If that seems absurd, maybe we could agree on the less alarmist view that in the history of the post-war United States, there's never been a more propitious time than the last few years to question the supposedly unassailable position of the country as a world power you wouldn't want to mess with. Any rising autocrat worth his salt who's kept up with the state of play here must be at least toying with the idea of trying his hand. The slow and inept have for years been promoted to positions of authority in the private sector. This last post-pandemic year has seen a sluggish return to economic life, the better to sponsor wall-to-wall catastrophe. We might have muddled on somehow, but I think we can all concur that we crossed a line with the vaccines. Sinovac and Sputnik weren't very effective against COVID in the end, but at least they were relatively harmless. You could hardly say the same about the snake oil from Pfizer, which had long since jettisoned all the company's skilled personnel. Me? I bought a fake vaccination certificate on the black market. I assume if you're perky enough to read this, you did the same. But far too many of our compatriots were credulous. I've lost track of the underreported mortality count, but at the minimum, it's in the tens of millions. By the time all the long-term side effects have taken their toll, the international death count could come to hundreds of millions. I don't care for hyperbole, but I don't believe this is an overstatement. The Pfizer miscalculation marked the start of a full-blown emergency. Watching an entire population swallow whole a transparently lunatic proposition and then jubilantly embrace a raft of ruinous new social conventions has profoundly lowered my estimation of people in general. I hesitate to exempt myself from that category, so I suppose this disappointment extends to yours truly. If people as a class are far less impressive than we'd like to think, then I am unimpressive too. But something difficult to pinpoint does distinguish me from most people. And if you're still reading this, you probably land in the same genetic camp. I don't honestly understand why I was born with a funny immunity to the dogmatic diseases that so easily infect our fellows, any more than I understood why certain phenotypes were unaffected by COVID-19. I'm loath to claim membership of an elect, and maybe I'd have been a more contented person these last few years if I'd mindlessly followed the crowd. After all, I've paid a terrible price for being out of sync. I lost my home, my partner, my job, my reputation, several years of my children's upbringing. All I can say is that I was made this way. I'm congenitally incapable of reciting with a shrug, "Oh, there's no such thing as stupid people. My mistake." By this point, it's indisputable that human beings will believe anything. Accordingly, a wide variety of historical phenomena that once confounded me now seem explicable, if not ordained. I'm no longer astonished by the Holocaust, and there's no country in the world that I would deem impervious to the modern equivalent of a Nazi takeover. Rather, I figure that full-blown fascism in, say, the US, the UK, Australia, France, Germany, for that matter, could manifest itself within approximately 3 weeks. Mao's Cultural Revolution, Stalin's labor camps, Cambodia's killing fields, they now strike me as perfectly normal. Likewise, the cult of Scientology, Jonestown, Waco, all the things I grew up with. I'm not in the least surprised that some people think a single drop of tincture diluted by 100 gallons of water will cure cancer. One thing I have learned, over a sustained period of time, it's impossible to promote a falsified viewpoint in a cynical spirit of pure self-interest, while simultaneously maintaining a private viewpoint diametrically at odds with the public one. It's too exhausting. It's too much mental labor to erect a wall in your head. In going along with cognitive equality in the classroom, the better to keep my job, I myself suffered brief blankings out, during which, for a second or two, the cognitive movement seemed plausible, or at least not flagrantly mad. After all, the public at large bought into this improbable ideology virtually overnight, and in no time forgot that they had ever believed anything else. Some of the funniest parts of the book are when she gets caught being subversive, and when her best friend betrays her, and her revenge against that friend is just brilliant. I think it would make a great movie, so if you are looking for an idea for a movie, this is it.